Welcome to the new Lorkers Podcast, where we bring you the best updates and opinions in the New York City Lorcana community and highlight some of the best people Lorcana has to offer. I'm your co-host, Cole.
And I'm Austin.
And we're excited because, first of all, we got a couple updates here in New York. First of all, I got a cat. Its name is Million. It is very cute. We rescued it from, Best Friends Animal Society. Very cute. And also, New York had its first 1K tournament. Nothing huge. It's, we're not doing CCS 12K yet, but 1K is a start for us. And I was able to go. I did not even make top 8. I went 10th place out of 27 people. But you know what? I showed up. And something we'll talk about in a minute is Hiram's band. And we actually had a diverse meta again. So, I didn't play the same deck every single match. I went up against all different decks. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. Anything new on your side, Austin?
Yeah, I'm really sad I got to miss that, especially since the high room was banned and I didn't get to play in that first big tournament. But yeah, it's not really New York based, but a team called Ink Inc., based in the DMV area, is hosting a big event on June 7th in the Baltimore area. So if you're around, come see that. I'll be judging. So yeah, come say hi.
Awesome. Love to see that. You're not just in on the player side, but you're in on the backside of judging. Well, today we have a special friend of ours and an important staple in the New York Lorcana scene, Danny, or as many of us know him, Danny from the Uncommons. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Well, we've got a ton to talk about today. We'll try to make it snappy because when this comes out, it'll be a little bit behind these bans. But yeah, we've got a ban. We got our first ban in Lorcana. Austin, could you kind of fill us in on what that is, what it means, and we'll kind of figure out where do we go from here?
Yeah, sure. So I guess big bans finally banning the rat himself, Hiram, as well as Fortisphere, which I think has been the more controversial choice, and I see why they did it. There's been plenty of discussion online if you're curious on why they may have done that. But really quickly, what that means for the meta is a lot of things are fair game, at least for now, while people are figuring things out. I thought it was a perfect time to bring in Danny, because Danny has been playing green-purple for at least as long as I've known him. Great green-purple player. So I wanted to get his take on that, especially because it's been really high popularity as of late in the recent tournaments.
So, Danny, we know you as a green-purple player, but before we dive into your ink identity, we'd love to know a little bit about where you get your gamer tag from. At first, I just knew Austin as Gattacain, or maybe I'm not even... Am I pronouncing that right? Gattacain or Gattacain?
I always said Gattacain. I'm pretty sure it's based on the movie Gattaca. My mom made it up when I asked what I should name my Adventure Quest characters. TLDR.
A lot of people just start to know each other by that and not even their real name. So could you tell us a little bit about BlightLord?
Yeah. So what it comes from is, you ever heard of the MMO City of Heroes?
Yes.
Yeah, no, Austin, I'm so sorry for you. There is a private server and you can go still play it. So there's MMO City of Heroes and it's offshoot City of Villains. I feel like Cole's Googling the private server right now.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And that was my main villain, was this character called BlightLord. There was a class where you could play a necromancer with these poison abilities, and that was the character I played the most, even though it wasn't my first character in the game. And it's one of those things where I think, especially for Discord, you just never know when a username is going to actually become part of a public identity versus just something that's only visible on the back end. You're like, oh, I'll remember that. There's been so many times where I'll join communities where I'm also meeting people in person going, God, yeah, that's the name that I have on that, isn't it? And at some point, you just got to kind of embrace it. So yeah, that's my City of Villains main. That is where that name comes from. It's just kind of stuck ever since.
Word, man. So you've come from a couple different games, both cards and video games. Before you got into Lorcana, what was kind of your stronghold? And I'm just talking right before, because I know there's probably a history of different games.
Yeah, so before Lorcana, tabletop-wise, it was a lot of dabbling. Dabbled in a little bit of Magic here and there, but mostly just sticking to Limited. I had friends that played very extensively, and I enjoyed playing with them, but only when they were handing me decks. They're like, yes, this deck is comparable to the deck that I'm going to be playing. The idea of showing up with my own collection against people who've had a much longer time to get to know the game never really appealed to me, but I love Limited. I love the idea of we have a somewhat even playing field to walk into. The pool of cards is pretty set. And then I played a bit of Hearthstone because it was online and it was available pretty easily. I enjoyed my time with that, but I've always been more of a tabletop board game person. And so the things that you learn in those games, like resource management, kind of reading the other players at the table with you, thinking a couple steps ahead as to what you want to do, and then learning to pivot on the fly with whatever shows up in the variants of the game. All good transferable skills that go into TCGs. Learning how to kind of build an engine is pretty big in a lot of board games. That's where most of my background is. Lorcana is kind of the first card game that I really sunk my teeth into, built a collection, got to know the people, got to know the meta and what everyone was playing and why. And so it's been a very big growing experience.
That's awesome, man. Were you from the beginning, August 2023, or did you start seeing that it actually was a viable game and then come in later?
So at the store, at Uncommons, we get magazines that let us know about games that are up and coming. And Lorcana had big splash pages all over at least one of these magazines a couple months before release. I think just before D23, the first D23 that Lorcana was at, they had started putting out press releases. Because I remember seeing how crazy people went at that first D23 when they had Lorcana stuff at the event. And I told the other folks at the store, if this game just has screenshots from the movies for the card art, we won't bother. That'll tell you all you need to know. But once we started seeing card art come out and it was all custom, new, purpose made, there was alternate versions of the characters that were being created. Once we saw that they were actually willing to not only make new art for the game, but also play with those characters a little bit, even from the get-go, I was like, okay, they're really going to try to make something out of this. And then seeing how excited people were even just at D23 for it, it's like, oh, good. I'm not the only person who thinks that they're putting effort into this and this will be fun. So we picked the game up from day one. I really wanted it. A coworker of mine, Tatum, really wanted it, even just for our own personal selfish reasons. Wanted to have it come in the store. Fortunately, there was a community in New York that also was interested in checking out the game, and we got to meet, get to know each other, and have a good time.
I love that. I feel like I can relate to seeing the fact that they weren't just taking stills from the movies, because I came in thinking it was just going to be a great collectability item. I wasn't actually going to play the game. I was just going to collect it because someone's always going to want to buy Disney stuff. Someone's always, if it goes downhill and it doesn't work out, like I'll have the base set and someone will want it because it's unique. It's special. It's not just a copy paste from the movies. And then lo and behold, I realized it was a really well designed game and I started playing it. But
yeah,
that's a great point, because even what used to be Project K, what's the name for it, Austin? Riftbound, right. I saw people being like, you see, it's not just copy paste from the game or the show, like it's original art, and that's really promising.
Yeah, they actually had pushback for a while because they ripped a lot of their card art from their previous online TCG. And then they had a release video and all the borders were white and ugly and everyone complained about the cards being straight rips. And they went back and redesigned and they just released an announcement video and everything's completely new and it looks so great. So I'm excited for that too, but a little off topic.
Yeah. We've all seen or played Disney IP board games, and Ravensburger, they're known as a board game and puzzle company. So I don't think it was an unfair worry that they would have used stills. Because that's what a lot of like the Disney board games do. It's a lot easier that way. But no. They really put everything into it. They took a big swing, and I think it's paying off.
I can definitely see some inspiration from Villainous,
yeah.
Especially in the inkable circle, like some of that kind of like intertwining art almost looks like a braid.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of that was used in Villainous, but it's now unique enough that it is its own thing and it's not just a replicant. We could talk forever about just the artwork of it because that's a whole big topic on how they need to improve. But the fact that they've gotten as far as they have is really great. Now, you've mentioned that you work at the Uncommons. Can you tell us a little more about your role there and what the Uncommons does for the Lorcana community?
Yeah, so my role for Uncommons officially on paper is general manager. So what that generally looks like is if there's something that the store needs in order to keep functioning, I do it. That's scheduling, that's payroll, that's ordering cafe supplies, making sure that we have events scheduled for different games, being like HR sometimes, things like that. So I kind of like wear a lot of very different hats, organizing our backstock, just all over the place. The only things that I don't really touch are I don't have to deal with paying the bills. That's a pretty big one.
That's nice.
And yeah, it's nice. And then my assistant general manager, they actually handle all of the games ordering and they handle the beer ordering. So those are two nice big things to kind of have on somebody else's plate.
Now I know who to contact.
That's the one to contact. Yeah, but seriously though, if there's a local beer that you're really into, if there's a brewery you really like, we're always open to hearing people tell us like, hey, I really like this place. Like all the beers that we stock, this is not, Lorcana League doesn't approve of drinking alcoholic games, but all the beers that we stock are local or like smaller craft brewery type things. So if you've got a personal favorite, that's kind of what we want to have on hand. As far as doing things for the Lorcana community, my biggest thing when we first got information from Ravensburger on what they wanted it to look like was they were very focused on that league format. The idea that you would come to the same place week after week, you would accrue points. Those points would net you some like loyalty rewards, basically based on not so much your win rate in Lorcana, but your participation, your engagement with the community. And there were certain things that I wasn't as crazy about. I didn't really enjoy the idea of making people wear collectibles to get points, but I did like the idea that every game that mattered, whether you won or lost. You're bringing friends to events, that mattered. The fact that you were showing up week over week, that mattered. And then instead of having the if you wear something component, I added in if you trade something as being a way to earn points. The idea being that sometimes those trades are legit. Sometimes it is like a trade that somebody needs to facilitate their deck. And honestly, at the end of the day, if somebody goes, hey, I'm going to give you my, I don't know, I'm going to give you a copy of Sudden Chill, and you hand me a copy of, I don't know.
Sudden Chill.
Yeah, but literally fine. Yeah, that's actually, let's do it. My Sudden Chill for your Sudden Chill. Yours has a ding on the right corner, mine has a ding on the left corner. Here's our trade. If that's what it takes to get two people who don't know each other to have that little moment of connection, that's worthwhile. That's the real point. And so people just talked to each other a lot more, I feel, because there was that incentive in trading. People would just openly ask anyone looking for trades and make that happen. And then because we were doing this sort of more open format, we were playing without any rounds to the structure. So you could bring multiple different decks. You could bring a deck that was kind of a goofier concept, because if you won or lost, it didn't really matter that much for what you took home. Now, with Ravensburger wanting to do a more of a structured format, there's less room for that kind of open play type thing. I know some stores I've seen have been kind of pushing back a little bit and wanting to preserve some of the league system. But at the same time, for all the good that league does, you also have the feeling of like, oh, well, I missed a week, so I was out of town. So I'm off the wagon. It's, there's no point. So there's pros and cons to it. So what we try to do now is to preserve some of that sense of you don't have to be the best player at the event. You just have to show up and you will be rewarded in some capacity for showing up. I would much rather cater to the 2-1s in the world than the 3-0s or the 5-0s or whatever, because there are more of them, and because they, they're ones who really kind of keep the game going.
Yeah, and to that point, there will be more events that are higher scale that you will have monetary prizing that they can go to and they're going to go to and compete very well in. So maybe having something for a more general audience is a good idea.
Yeah, we've done that too with the set championships. I've checked in a couple of times with the community at large, but they give you the option between doing 3-game format or 2-game format for the Swiss phase of the set championship. To my knowledge, no other store runs 2-game format for set championships. So we do it as kind of like, well, hey, if you want to experience 2-game format, but you don't want to go to it, or can't go for that matter, to a DLC, you can come do that at this one event at least. Enough people seem to enjoy that it seems like it's worth doing. No one has outright told me I will never come to this event because you're doing 2-game format. So long as that's the case, we'll keep playing with that. We just want to try and create opportunities for the broadest range of players. Sometimes that comes at the sacrifice of loading up your top end players with goodies, but it means that you can spread more goods out across more players.
Man, I love that. There are other card games where I enjoy other formats better. I think Magic Draft is brilliant. I love being able to actually craft certain archetypes and be able to strategize and have to know the cards to build the deck. It's really, really fun. But to me, the community of Lorcana makes me stay. And people like you, Danny, and like the Uncommons help perpetuate this idea of community and make this about being together and communicating and meeting new people. And that's what gets me out of the house. I work a 9 to 5 at my house, so I'm trying to get out right at 5 to go do something, to go meet people and talk to people. And places like the Uncommons help me actually escape and find new people and find new interactions. So thanks for doing that for people in the community like myself. I think that that's what makes all the difference, on top of playing this really cool card game.
And I mentioned briefly that Danny's a really good green-purple player. We didn't really talk about your ink identity, so do you identify as a green-purple player, or did it take some time to get there?
It's kind of been slowly developing over time. Dabbled a lot with green-purple, starting with Ursula's Return. Prior to that, I was just villain tribal. That's what I wanted. When the game was coming out, I said, if I can build a villains deck and it's like got some support, I'll be happy to play every week. And that got me through for a couple sets. I was pretty happy, just like, yeah, these are my villains. And sometimes players would go, oh, I didn't realize that it's possible for a deck to get 12 lore in one turn, but I guess that just happened. This was, pre-Lucky Dime. And then as I started doing set championships, that was really what changed it. When the set championships started, I guess if I want to actually walk away with anything, I'm going to have to look at what actually works and start thinking less about what's going to be goofy and I can catch somebody off guard with, and how does a deck actually come together? Especially when you're playing tribal, because usually you're just playing worse versions of other cards from more competitive decks. So I started playing green-purple in Ursula's Return, mostly because I just wanted to play a deck that had Ursula featured in it for the Ursula card, but then I really fell in love with the color identity itself. I really enjoyed the bounce package and the way that you could throw off your opponent's math a little bit with these little tricks and turns. And I've always really enjoyed how Emerald has this identity of hard choices. I'm going to put this card on the table and you're going to have to decide what to do with it. Some players are really, really smart and they don't fall for any bait. But for a lot of people, you put enough sticky situations in front of them and they start to make mistakes. And if you can capitalize on those, it's just a good time.
I think that's a great way to describe Emerald because most people just identify it with discard. That's not the only thing it does, but it's a major thing.
Discard is a hard choice.
Exactly. Discard falls under that umbrella of I'm going to give you two options and you have to choose the better in your situation. So discard will do that to a lot of people. And especially if you're up against a new red-blue player, if they aren't ready to discard the right one, that might throw off their entire game. So I like that clarification of what Emerald does. I'm going to go ahead and share your deck list that you gave us, calling it Dire Theatrics. I like that a lot.
Another screen name that's always never intended to be public, but there you go.
Well, it's public now.
Yep.
You've got some cards in here that I don't think I've ever had played against me. I want to start with those because I want to understand them. First and foremost being Bounce. I also wasn't around during set 2, so it's possible people play that in set 2. But I've never seen Bounce, and I've never seen Thomas O'Malley played against me. So I'd love to hear some of the reasoning on that, and then I'd like to hear the overall theme of the deck and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so this is a little bit like showing somebody your dirty room, because this is very much still a work in progress. The local meta has so much steel, whether it's Steel Song or Green Steel is now making a big return with Hiram out of play. Steel is just not something Green Purple wants to see. For a couple big reasons. The high attack power that some of their cards have, the high willpower that some of their cards have, and the direct damage with a lot of low willpower characters on your end. So you're starting to see Madam M Snake falling off for a lot of people. You're starting to see a lot of back and forth for people about how many rabbits, how many genies, do you even play both of them? Problem with Snake is that I would be playing 5 or 6 characters, but ultimately only still have one character on the board because I just keep bouncing something in and out. Meanwhile, the Amber Steel player is getting wider and wider and wider with things that I have a hard time removing. So the idea of Green Purple in the Bounce deck building taller doesn't seem to work super well with how the local scene at least is right now. So what Bounce does is I return a character to my hand and you return a character to your hand. The cost of that character could be anything. The attack power of that character could be anything. I could return my 1-cost little Diablo back to hand, and you're going to return your 6-cost Maui Shark back to hand. And if I'm really in a good spot, what I'm bouncing back to hand is probably something more like the Merlin Goat or the Crab, or maybe swapping that Genie back for the Rabbit. And so in addition to making you put a card back in hand while I put one back in hand, I'm getting advantage off of that. So that's why I've been playing with Bounce. It's a form of removal where I can hopefully also gain some advantage out of it. Thomas O'Malley is kind of an iffy addition, but what's nice about him is he has Ward and 4 attack power. So if you're playing against a Steel player, they have to trade into it. There is the Prince Philip from the previous set that people would run for a similar reason, but he had 3 attack power. This has 4. So what would happen with Philip is you would quest with him. They'd run something with 4 willpower into it. They'd heal it with Rapunzel on curve, basically, and you would give them 3 free cards. With Thomas O'Malley, they're not doing that. What else is kind of weird in here?
Bippity. Bippity is not very used.
Bibbidi is my pet card. I desperately want Bibbidi to work for a couple reasons. It does so many fun, goofy things in this color combination. If you play Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, for anybody who doesn't know, you return a character of yours to your hand, and you play another character from hand of the same cost or less. Because your hand is private information, that can also just be the same character. You can pick up a goat and put that goat right back down. That is 2 lore from the past. Ran Ursula, Deceiver of All. She's saying Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo on a goat. So you would play Ursula on 3, on 4 you would play the goat, she would sing Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, and you would have gained 5 lore on your 4th turn. Ursula's not worth it in this iteration because Bibbidi's the only song in here right now, but it gives you an idea of the extremes. You could also do things like have the crab sing Bibbidi on itself, and instead of Challenger 3, now something has Challenger 6. It can fix a lot of problems for you. There's other applications. I mean, Cricky can give everything on your board plus 6 attack power if you play him and then sing something and have him drop again, or just to regain that plus 3 attack power. Elsa can rush in and hit something twice if you want to do it that way and exert 2 separate characters. Or it can be a heal. If you need to heal something up, you can flicker it with Bibbidi. Again, it just throws off your opponent's math, and that's all that this deck really wants to do, is just try to play a bit more of a tempo game and to always make your opponent a little bit unsure of what is and is not safe to leave on the board while they try to advance their own plan.
I just realized you're not playing Diablo.
No.
Like Diablo.
Yeah.
But you are playing the smaller versions of it.
Yeah.
Is that a bit of mind trickery? Tell me the strategy behind that.
So the thought process is if the discard variant of green-purple becomes super popular, everyone will tech for Diablo. What ends up happening is he becomes kind of a brick in hand if you're playing against certain decks. I'd rather play something a little stickier, or I would rather they anticipate that I'm going to be having Diablo and play around it, and then I do something entirely different. You still want to run the one-drop Diablo, because if you're playing it against a Cinderella singer or against the Belle item singing situation, at least if they Storm Rage on, the Storm is gone out of their hand, it's done, they've played it, they get a card, you get a card, it's okay. It's an acceptable trade versus, if it was Turn-a-Box Followers or some other one-drop. Also, then there's the Befuddle. I don't have a good one-drop to play in this turn. Now, neither do you.
I really like this tempo game plan. I've been experimenting with using both Bounce and Befuddle and trying to do some Cloud Kicker stuff, but I didn't end up liking that as much. I do agree with you that once people start teching for Diablo, it becomes an inherently worse card, especially because to shift it, you're giving up another card, and also just playing it doesn't feel like the best tempo a lot of the times because you're not getting the quest off, you're not getting the card. But do you think there's another next step? What is the next step of draw engine? And in my opinion, that would be if you're not playing discard, going back to Clarabelle's, because a lot of these times you're getting your stuff discarded. Clarabelle's kind of like the next move where, okay, if you're discarding all my cards and Diablo is an inherently worse card, maybe Clarabelle's not a bad idea to refill my hand because you have a big hand and you discarded all my stuff.
For green-purple specifically, a lot of Amethyst's identity is really built into its draw power. And so I want to believe that I don't need the Clarabelle, that I can get draw off of other stuff in here, but she's also another big body. And if Steel's going to be a huge problem, that may not be the worst thing to have, is to have just one more high attack power, high willpower thing to throw in there and try and disrupt their board.
As an Amethyst player, I often don't see no friends on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of an Amethyst having the draw power, what's the reasoning behind that, and where do we find that draw instead?
I've been playing with this a little bit more today, and I've originally had a couple rabbits in here alongside the genies, but I think if you're going to play Bounce and you're going to play Bibbidi, and then of course you have Mimfox, but it's a little bit different. If you're going to play Bounce and Bibbidi, it might actually be more valuable to run the rabbits. Again, coming back to the idea of, hey, I'm going to play Bounce and you're going to get nothing for this card going back to your hand. I am going to get to draw something, protect my rabbit, versus you don't want to use Bounce on your own genie because then you're just 4 cost unnickable sitting in hand that you got to figure out what to do with later. And same thing for Bibbidi. Instead of drawing 1 card, you'll draw 2 if the rabbit sings it on itself. So I think for this particular build right now, rabbit, even though it's not evasive, even though it only quests for 1, might be the more valuable between the two of them, because you still have Peter Pan Shadowfinder and Iago to do some Genie War stuff, or you can bounce your rabbit to bounce their genie, and you're building card advantage that way. I think that the reason why I wanted to step away from Friends on their side is so that I could focus more on questing and focus more on drawing card advantage from doing things like sending the rabbits back and forth and running things like the 1-cost Diablo, as opposed to exerting a character to sing a song.
I see. Before we compare this to the discard method, we now don't have to worry about Huram. A lot of Sapphire we thought was going to fall out, but Sapphire is still strong. And Sapphire Ruby has been giving me nightmares lately, and I'm really trying to find ways to actually out the shark. So are you preparing to out the shark, and what is it in here that you're trying to do that with?
Bounce is a big one. If I'm bouncing a 1-cost character back to my hand to bounce back your 6-cost character, it's a decent, expenditure of ink to do it that way. It's not gone for good. The Maui Shark will be back, but if I can just keep delaying that game a little bit until I find a better answer, that's not totally invaluable. If you already have an evasive character on the board when that Maui Shark is exerted, or if you are in a position where you have a little bit of a board state to where Elsa can come and exert something, being able to get additional flickers of that crab with Bibbidi are not bad. So there's a couple ways to deal with it. There's stalling it with Bounce. Elsa's swinging in for 8 because you've Bibbidi the crab, things like that. So there's not a wealth of answers, and there never have been. That's always been why Maui Shark has been hard for these colors is, you only have so many ways to deal with it, but you do have ways.
Totally. That's a great point. I like this idea of can't stop it, but if you give me enough time, I will find the resources.
Yeah.
But, turn 5 and turn 6 is really difficult to deal with it. So let me delay it. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share before I switch over to show a different version?
Like I said, this is all kind of a work in progress. Thomas O'Malley is a maybe. Genie for Rabbit is a maybe. It's largely in response to how much Seal I'm seeing in locals. Without Hiram and with other answers to Diablo, I'm not running Kit Cloudkicker, which a lot of decks are.
I think that's a great point. Knowing your community, knowing who else is playing and what they're playing is going to help you out a ton. So tweak these decks as you need to, because you never know. Your community might not run Steel at all. Maybe this deck that we're about to share that is more discard related is going to be more helpful for you.
I've been back and forth between New York and the Bay Area. Metas are completely different, just between those two cities alone. I mean, in New York, like you're saying, lots of steel, lots of blue. So when I came here to do a set champs, I didn't know the meta at all. And I was like, oh, there's going to be a lot of blue-red. Every single person that day was on purple, yellow aggro. Well, I guess I just lose. So yeah. It's very important to know your local meta.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of very successful Steel Song players and a lot of successful red-blue players, but I think Steel Song is the deck that most people find the most approachable.
Yeah. Steel Song is just playing aggro with extra steps.
It's very aggressive, but the removal options just kind of, everything just feels very clean. You just know what you need to find. You know what you're looking for when you play Steel Song.
Totally. Well, as we look at this deck, this is really interesting because looking at it at first glance, it looks pretty similar to a green steel, but you're putting in those purple staples. So I'm seeing Ursula, discard Ursula. We have a little bit of aggro up front with the Cursed Merfolk, but of course that's taking cards out of hand. I haven't seen Flynn Rider in a minute, actually. So going more of the aggressive, challenge me and find out method.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we've got our top end. But yeah, as you see this compared to your tempo method, what stands out to you?
So what I like about this deck is the hypothetical curve of Merfolk on 1, Flynn on 2, Deceiver of All Ursula on 3, and you're hoping that your opponent either has wasted a lot of their resources on trying to deal with those 2 questers that you play in the early game, so that by the time that Ursula comes out and starts wanting to do her thing, the table is set for her to do that. If you're playing against a non-steel deck or a steel player who doesn't want to sack their songs onto these characters, they're going to have to discard to get rid of them. The whole theory behind this is to bait you into spending your resources early on these seemingly big threats, and they are threats. You can't ignore them. Making you decide how you want to deal with that is pretty major. I don't know how well this does on the top end. That's my biggest concern, because I'm not seeing a lot of things that can efficiently clear locations, a lot of things that would be happy to see, like Lawrence, for example. And that's just the struggle with these colors in general. But I think that there is something to this list and the idea of pressuring your opponent, and it's interesting to have a discard list that instead of being all action and song based is also character based.
Yeah, ensuring that you have that board presence is super, super important. As you're saying, we're seeing a couple different types of locations. We have to be able to challenge and take out certain things at a certain point. But I do see Mother Knows Best.
Sometimes it's tricky because you don't always want to bounce something back to hand. Sometimes there's just certain characters that your opponent would be all too happy to put back on the board. So it's not as great an answer as straight up removal, obviously. But in a pinch,
That's a great point. Austin, what do you see in this deck? What excites you and what terrifies you?
Kit is one of my favorite cards. It's very meta dependent on whether or not you play it, but seeing it here probably as a Diablo answer is very important because you're putting up a body on the board that's taking a relevant threat off the board, then you can sing friends with it. That's huge, in my opinion. What I dislike about this list is no Cricky. I think Cricky is so vitally important to these green-purple decks because you need something late game that can affect the board immediately, and you're already building that tempo. And just being a 3-questing body with decent stats is amazing. I don't see me personally playing any of these lists without Cricky.
Yeah, the way that Cricky enables you to actually challenge these much tougher characters. If you're not going to play Cricky, you need something that does a similar effect.
Totally. Well, Danny, if someone were to come to you and say, I am new to Lorcana, but I know that Amethyst and Emerald is going to be my jam, what is kind of the 101, day one information that they would have to know to understand the deck?
I think if you're going to play green-purple, the biggest thing is you have to give yourself permission to stop and breathe. It's not always a straightforward deck. It's going to be things where you're trying to figure out what makes the most sense to bounce. When do I play this thing to draw? When am I done playing the rabbits to draw? There's no more answers to dig for. What's in my hand is what I'm working with. And if you get too panicky, you're going to miss those good applications of those bounce cards. you don't want to delay the game. Don't sit there for 5 minutes every turn because your opponent will hate you. But you should give yourself some permission to look at your board, look at your hand, breathe, and then think through what you're playing before you just start slapping cards down. The other big thing is if you know for a fact that you're going to draw a card somewhere in your sequence of your turn, always draw it first if it doesn't change the rest of your sequencing as you currently conceive it, because what you draw might actually change your sequencing. I weirdly see a lot of players in different colors that will draw last because they're like, and this is the part that doesn't matter. It's like, no, that might have changed your whole strategy. The last thing is if you're going to play green purple, you need to develop a level of comfort with the fact that you will not always be able to cleanly deal with everything. At least how the colors are right now, that's just sort of the way it is. Every form of removal in both green and purple either revolves around sending something back to their hand, or it's going to be moving damage around. And you can't always guarantee that you're going to have damage on the board to move around either. So if you feel anxiety about not having clean removal, or if you feel some jealousy when you watch a ruby player or a steel player just start blowing your whole board up, it may not be the colors for you. But if you can kind of embrace that feeling of like, I'm going to make you tilt before we're done, I think you'll have a great time with these colors. I think that's kind of what they're for.
So green purple is you either tilt or be tilted.
Exactly, yes. It is a race to see who can tilt first or who could tilt last. It's one of the two.
One of my favorite cards in green has not been in lists lately. I personally think it should belong in lists, especially now. And that's Go-Go. I think Go-Go is an amazing finisher. I wanted to at least bring it up because there's so many applications for it. With these colors, you have ways of exerting characters and navigating damage. I think there's a lot of potential opportunity. And a lot of these decks like to focus around, I discard or I draw. What are you drawing towards if not a finisher? And I think Cricky is one of those cards that is that finisher, but definitely Go-Go. I've been running it in my lists. I'm curious where you stand on that card.
I've been playing with it. The list that I put in today did not have it because I wanted to see what happened if I didn't run Go-Go. I totally agree. I think that Go-Go can be a great closer. You never want to see her any earlier than you need her. You're not playing her on curve, and you're probably not even playing her for 4. You're trying to play her at the very end of the game to surprise your opponent for a quick 3 or 4 lore. Again, throwing off math, things that these colors love. So I don't think she's a bad inclusion at all, and I might even be tempted to put her back in at some point. That 2-drop slot is still really weird for me outside of the Ursula Deceiver. The other thing for Go-Go is as much as I love her in green purple, I don't know why people don't play her in green steel. Maybe your opponent doesn't leave you damage on the board, but you're green steel, you're going to make damage on the board. We're kind of reliant on our opponent making a mistake, leaving the damage on the board for us to take advantage of, as opposed to making the damage ourselves.
I'm a green-yellow player from the start, and I personally replaced my my Sorhisses with Go-Go because I think it's a great card. And a good example of it coming in handy is I was playing another player who was on Steel Song, and I managed to steal a game because I had inked to 8 ink, and I had 2 Go-Gos in hand. I knew he was just questing with everything because that's what Steel Song does when they're that late in the game. He quested with its Robin Hood, and I just beat it up a little bit and double Go-Go'd and got 12 lore immediately. So I think it's great. And also, in decks like that, I think Sorhiss is just there to be a threat to their Diablo and also to be a 2-drop singer. I think a 2-drop singer is really important. So you don't mind dropping Go-Go early in a deck like Discard. Because it's there to sing your bare necessities. It's there to sing your 7 shows, right? I don't know why people are not running it in those decks too.
There is a world where I'd be pretty tempted to put it back in, again, for more Bibbidi applications, like put her on the board for 4, another character since Bibbidi, pay an extra 2 when I put her back down, gain the lore twice off the damage. It's really just a matter of how much do I fear leaving a damaged character up on board for them to heal with Rapunzel. And that's really the only time where I regret playing into the Go-Go. But if it results in my opponent being scared to leave damage on the board, then I think it's worthwhile.
So yeah, you were saying kind of be a meta call for this deck in particular to run Go-Go. So what would you be looking for it to be a good environment to play Go-Go?
Anything where I'm not worried about Rapunzel or Baymax getting more value off of the damaged characters than I'm going to potentially get off Go-Go.
I finally made my final, and I'm saying it right now, my last Rapunzel mistake this weekend. He had 2 Rapunzels on the board, and I was like, there's no way you've got that 3rd Rapunzel in hand.
They do say make them have it, and sometimes they have it,
And sometimes they freaking have it, man. So that Rapunzel, you do got to look out for it. Before we wrap up, there was something that we didn't talk about earlier. Did want to hit on how you got involved with the Uncommons and how that originated. And then we wanted to talk about just being able to run a successful event, because we've only experienced really positive events from the Uncommons. Overall, we feel like you guys run a really well coordinated event. Everyone feels involved. Everyone feels like they made it worth their time. So first of all, how did you get involved? And then second of all, how are you pulling off these wonderful events?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, I think it's very kind. It's also nice to hear. So I got involved with the Uncommons. Originally, it was just going to be a pandemic survival job. Most of my background is in theater, acting, directing, things like that. This kind of tails into the events thing, but I'm used to managing a group of people who have attention spans of varying degrees. I joined in January before all of New York closed down. The store closed, everything for a few months. We were allowed to come back because we were a business that served coffee, which was one of the essential business exceptions. The fact that we were primarily a games cafe was not kind of the issue. Like we were a coffee shop and we happened to have retail. We could not do any indoor events, and we did not do any indoor events for those first couple months until it was allowed to some degree by the city. And even when we were allowed to bring events back or to bring people back in the store, we were still trying to go through these procedures to try and set games aside for several days before we let people pick them back up again, trying to figure out how to have this very high touch environment during a time when people were being told don't touch things. So it was tricky. Throughout the pandemic, we were such a small staff. My role in the Uncommons was sort of like a series of battlefield promotions. That's how I usually refer to it. There was not that many of us. We had some people who they came back to help out when things reopened, and then went back to the job they had before. It started with just doing payroll and scheduling at first. And then it started with, hey, do you want to help out with some interviews? Like, oh yeah, I want to pick my coworkers. Who doesn't? And then all of a sudden I'm being introduced as the general manager. It's like, oh, well, okay, I guess so. And you just kind of, I think it's like a lot of jobs. You just keep picking up responsibilities left and right, and you try to kind of keep track of how many responsibilities you're picking up as you go and making sure that that's understood, that you are adding new things to your job. But there's been benefits to going about it that way. Like I said, I got to pick my coworkers. They're all, very lovely people. They're really great. Everybody kind of has their niche, which is really fun. As far as running the events goes, the biggest thing is you can't make everybody happy, but you can try to make the most people happy. And so that kind of goes back to, wait, I don't necessarily need to care about the 3-0s. I need to care about the 2-1s and the 1-2s. It's not that we don't love the 3-0s and that we don't want to also make sure that they feel some sense of achievement for doing well, but we want to make sure that we're not doing it at the expense of everybody else at the event. I would much rather give everyone a couple packs and kind of spread the love. The thing that I learned from talking to this community is how much players really do think about the value of what they're getting out of the event. Expected value is a foreign term to me before really getting involved in this game. And so my guideline when I'm trying to plot out how to prize an event is, as long as the players who are in that set 2-1 slot typically are at least breaking even, if not coming out a little bit ahead, I think we've structured it well. Because there's two things you have to consider. I mean, the first thing you have to consider is the happiness and the health of your player base, because if they're not happy, they're not going to come. And if that happiness is mostly measured on the player end, and I do this too, in what you can expect to get for playing in the event, then you have to pay attention to that. You have to make sure that value is there. At the same time, you could give every player in the event a case of product, but only for so long. So there's the health of the store side of it too. You want to give your players as much as you possibly can without sacrificing the long-term health, your ability to be there for the players. Some stores are a lot more guarded on that, and maybe they should be. But for me, as long as I can make sure that those 2-1 players are walking out with equal value or a little better, I know the 3-0 players will be overvalue, and then the 1-2s may be slightly under. The 0-3s will walk away with something, so they don't feel terrible. They still feel good when they walk out of the event to some degree. So long as all those things are in place, I think you have a good basic structure for an event, at least in terms of pricing. And then the other thing is just being a welcoming environment. Even if it's an early morning on a weekend day, you got to try and put on your best face and be excited to see your friends. It's a group of people that I just really do enjoy spending a lot of time with, and that helps a lot for running stuff like this.
I think that is a awesome set of standards. And of course, every business is going to have a different set of standards, but I think what you guys are doing is not just a great structure for yourselves, but for the community. Across the country, it may be easy to access some local game stores either by car, or maybe it is really difficult. But in New York, it takes effort to go out into the city, whether you have a car or, like me, you just use public transit. Sometimes I'm barely making it in time to the Uncommons, but I'm making the effort because it's worth it. The community makes it worth it. You build it and we will come. And you guys have built a really, really strong structure for this.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to make sure that you're treating people well. Some stores have a lot of room to really treat people well, and sometimes you're just trying to look at All right, what's the most we can give for the lowest possible entry fee, and still come out not at a loss, really?
Well, that wraps it up for me, I think. Is there anything else that you wanted to hit on, Austin?
No, I think that wraps it up for me as well. I'll briefly mention I did ask Danny for some resources to create a guideline for stores in New York, but I haven't had the time to really structure best practices. I'm still working on it, but just want to put that in there at the end.
We've done different formats too. Like, you've done movie night events where you can bring a deck where all the characters have to be from the same film. But we do a multiplayer event at least once per season. Once that championships are all said and done, once everybody's had their fill of the meta for that cycle, start to get into the more goofy stuff that kind of got us all started.
Yeah.
New formats is definitely something I'd love to hit on one day, because I do believe eventually there will be more established formats outside of core constructed. Because again, I come from Magic where there are like 57 different formats. So like there's something for everybody. And the kind of events that you guys are hosting really opens up that door for these new ideas. So I'm glad that the Uncommons does that. I'd love to see, some other stores try to cook something up that's a little different to allow us to just use the cards for something else that maybe we aren't used to.
Yeah, there's good precedent for it. If I understand correctly, the World of Warcraft trading card game, they would host PvE events with the raid boxes that you used to be able to buy. I talked to a Ravensburger dev at PAX Unplugged this past year about multiplayer a little bit. They are searching for what that multiplayer identity is, and what that looks like. We talked about maybe Lorcana should have like a pre-con box where there's like 5 decks in it with different color identities that, all fit kind of a fun multiplayer specific niche. Many seem pretty into that idea. So maybe in a couple sets, we'll get a nice little Lorcana game night box that'll come out and you can just crack that open, hopefully. But
that would be very cool.
Things on the horizon, hopefully.
Totally. Well, we have definitely spent a lot of time today talking with you. Danny, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for listening to the New Lorkers Podcast. For more updates and opinions on the New York City Lorcana community, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode.